Personally I would prefer that one bad made up of some more modest ladies. We opened this week with Uta cleaning up the cafe with Prune and her dog. Yeah, this Kaiba Pooch here might be a little too smart for its own good. Then again, maybe he was just absorbing the brain cells of the fairy, as apparently someone, aside from me, illegally uploaded their videos again. I got my razor right here, just saying. Regardless, it was helping up their popularity to the point that they were receiving more job offers, which thankfully weren't to promote some crappy energy drink or something, but more just stuff for their own community, like an annual festival that was coming up. Yep, they were going to get the main stage treatment and everything, which understandably put a little pressure on them, and they did consider turning down the offer. However, considering that she forced her dog to help with her cleaning, Uta had no problem convincing her friends to accept the offer. That said, if they were going to take the main stage, they did want to be in top form, thus they asked Tanaka if he could train all four of them. Oh yeah, they were counting Prune, even though she's a stuffed animal who couldn't really take to the stage herself. I mean, what? Is she supposed to suddenly take on like a humanoid or hell, even a full-on Precure form? That would just be silly. Okay, but seriously, they weren't even being subtle that the fairies were probably going to become the 6th major Precure of the season. Miron had her lock and key that's probably going to be like their transformation trinket, and Prune was going to join in on their little idol boot camp, even though again, she can't join them on stage. I mean, I get treating her like a member of the team, as she does contribute by being a monster radar and everything, but again, they're being overly blatant to the point it does feel kinda forced. In any case, Tanaka agreed to train the idol Precure by first having them run with tires tied to them. Okay, I get that's like a legit training regimen for athletes and shonen protagonists, and idols do need their stamina, but yeah, isn't that a little over the top there, dude? Then again, what am I saying? This episode was written by Akiko Inoue, so why should I expect subtlety from the head writer of Gojuger? I will at least say that Prune's setup with her dragging Meron on a sled was really cute at least. From there, they did do more actual idol stuff, like practicing their photogenic skills, like their smiles, winks, and their signature poses.
Yay! Yay! Yay!
Is she doing an upside down peace sign? Okay, one, that's more Aka's thing, and two, and some cultures that is considered to be kind of rude, just saying. Later though, and while she certainly did her best, Prune wasn't satisfied with her output. Don't worry, I've got the perfect solution for that. But yeah, obviously they were really hammering in how Prune was trying to be a proper member of this team. And while I do still think that the setup was kind of forced, she did at least have this wholesome scene with Uta to really get across that she was doing her best, which is a key element of properly building up that she's going to be joining the team, so I can't really complain.
Everyone died! The end.
The next day, the Precure continued their training at their private studio. Yeah, in hindsight, they probably could have just started with that. I mean, there's plenty of room to hold a yoga class in there. Though before anything, Uta had a gift for both of the fairies.
Spoon!
I don't get it.
Actually, they were supposed to act as mics like what she did back in the first episode, which, yeah, I get the symbolism and everything, but you couldn't have just splurged for a couple of, like, toy mics rather than stealing silverware from your family's cafe there, Uta. Thus, Miron was rightfully not too impressed with her gift, though she did get a better one from Prune.
You're a lesbian!
Anyway, the Precure decided to have a dress rehearsal and thus transformed. Meanwhile, in the Tavern of Darkness, Cuddy was still sipping hard for them and tried to hide it from Chokine with some outdated memes. However, she did appreciate him lollygagging and ordered him to handle the attack this week, especially with their other guy kind of out of commission. That looks less like a cold and more like a bad cocktail of sorts. With that, Kai tried to track down the strongest source of Kira they could, which he found floating around a very familiar looking building. Yep, he stumbled upon the studio and watched the teenage idols as they trained.
よし、警察。わかった。
Yeah, as I've said, I'm not a huge fan of Kai's face turn here, especially when he hasn't really left a significant impact on the show, as really he's only been a bumbling little comedic villain. Thus, even him developing Kira here just felt more inevitable than anything. I mean, come on, we need some sort of dramatic twist to make his falling out mean something more than just that. Okay, that's a good start. Yep, the big bad herself, Darkine, actually took advantage of him developing Kira to turn him into a monster of the week, which was basically Giant Robo with Mazinger colors. The latter I get, as Toei has animated the Mazinger series and is at least on working terms with Golden Guy these days, but I'm a little surprised to see them make a blatant Giant Robo reference. Then again, the Teen Titans got away with it, so why not? BT dubs, I've never actually seen Giant Robo myself, so I do wonder what happens in it. Like, who did they even find that series at?
On total world domination.
Hail, big fire!
Well, this video's gonna get demonetized. Well, thankfully, the Precure wouldn't have to fight any Yahtzees, especially considering the last one they fought. Instead, they just had a really good fight this week. Like, I'm not too familiar with the animation directors this week, other than this one animation from Seiji Masta, but I'm pretty sure most of the best sequences in this particular fight were done by Toru Takano, who has given us some great sequences this season, as well as really throughout the Reiwa era. They just have a really good sense for speed and energy, especially when it comes to the impact of the hits. Still, of course, with this season so far, the Precure, we're just gonna get the win eventually and... Okay, maybe not an immediate W? Well, anyway, Prune tried to join in and got swatted away like a fly, and okay, her bravery drove the Precure to perform their group finisher and everything. Well, alright, just as expected, this team was, of course, not just going to lose, and they just blew the bastard up after all that and...
Where's the kaboom? There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom!
Yeah, surprisingly, and yet kinda thankfully, Cuddy actually totally tanked their attack and almost outright defeated the Precure. The only thing that stopped him was a slight glimmer of Kira that was still in him and made him retreat, but he wasn't defeated. And yeah, I actually really like this little outcome. I mean, my biggest criticism with modern Precure in general has been the nerfing of the villains. Sure, they have to be defeated in the end, but there also should be some sort of challenge that could come from having the Precure be defeated by them every so often, but these show's writers have been unable to implement that due to the internal policy at Toei limiting the amount of cliffhangers they could have per season because apparently the target audience can't handle low suspense.
Well, the chart says...
An outcome like this is a decent compromise, as technically they're not ending this episode on a cliffhanger, and yet the Precure also didn't just win. At best, you could say this was a no contest, but really it was a loss, as not only did Cuddy have them dead to rights, but Prune also felt dejected that she couldn't do anything to help, which made that pedestal that they put her on throughout this episode just crumble. Thus, later that night, she decided to go on a spirit journey to Kira Land to figure out how she could become a proper member of this team. With that, the episode ended with her leaving, but Meron seemed to be close in tow as she had discovered something about her lock and key that could help them in their little journey. I'll admit, this episode didn't really hit with me until like the latter half, but boy was that a good latter half. Dark Kine, and kind of by extension, the Choki gang, are finally starting to pick up momentum, and thus justifying the need for the Precure to step up their own game. And seemingly, they'll do this by having Prune of all characters actually go through what could be a really great little character arc. When I really think about it, the structure of this episode is a lot like that one other show Akiko Inoue is writing for this very same season. The first half is entertaining enough, if a little low on stakes due to things seeming inconsequential, but once the battle starts and the villain's plans start to unravel, that's when things start to get good, as those previous little inconsequential bits suddenly become really important. In this case, and while I still do think Perine's involvement in their training felt forced, it did make her epic fail against Cuddy hit all the harder, as she was knocked off the perch that the Precure ended up putting her on, and made her realize that she's not suited to be an idle Precure just yet. As a result, I actually am starting to feel for the illegal uploading little gremlin, especially with Meron having shown us that she can be determined if anything. It's really good build up to one, or more likely, both of them becoming Precure by the end of this arc. And of course, to motivate such a shakeup to the status quo, they need to raise the villain stock, which thankfully they finally did, by just having them at least get a technical victory over our heroines. It just makes a huge difference when the baddies can gain at least some sort of upper hand against our heroines. Not to mention, it does kind of fix my issues with Cuddy, who was an ineffective villain, by turning him into an effective victim of the big bad who now feels properly ruthless. Top that off with a really good fight this week, and yeah, this was just a really good episode and shakeup for the status quo that they really needed. In the end, maybe running with those tires did something, as the show and its writing is starting to get a lot stronger. Thanks for watching, and if you're about to go into your own little training arc, well, before that, maybe you can watch some of our videos. In fact, I've heard these videos can help with your training. I mean, that's more of a self-diagnosis, but still, it counts. Look forward to Princession tomorrow. Until then, though, for now, my friends, and, are you running with one of my spare tires? Hey, come on, you're getting sand in it!